What I get to talk about today is actually kind of fun. It's business models, and unlike a lot of aspects of business models themselves, they change all the time. And as a matter of fact, they become an incredibly intricate and important part of how a business succeeds or fails, which is something new. As I've worked around MIT for the past 15 or more years, so often the researchers, scientists, engineers that I speak with are so focused on their product, their technology, the intricacies of a particular design, that they actually don't think about the customer, and they don't think about how it's ever going to get to the market. They're more interested in, can they actually get that new particular, engineering, physics, combined technology to do something they never did before. Can they get that particular molecule to operate in a certain way, or can they get that thin film polymer to elute a particular drug? And that's fantastic, but very often we forget about how do we actually impact the world with our technologies, whether it be internet technologies, applications, hardware, software, biotechnology. So business models are really the foundation of that, and very often that's left to business students. And one of the wonderful things about MIT is that there's this great convergence where business students actually have discussions with engineers and scientists and researchers and vice versa, and that doesn't happen everywhere. So we sort of take it for granted here. So I'm very privileged to come and talk to you about business models. My background, as Joe said, is, I started really my career in technology and then moved very much into bioscience, biotechnology, bioinformatics, diagnostics. Spent about the past 10 years doing that. Took 2 years off and was focused specifically on the financial services industry. So worked for a very large fund in Westport, Connecticut. Now back in the Boston area, and now focused again more on not only funding and financing of early stage development companies, but also in identifying great intellectual property and technology all around science and research. So today's talk is going to be about business models, and I'm hoping to share some insights with you. Essentially, this is how I think of these things. We start off with a whole bunch of disparate data points. We call that information. Hopefully, we begin to connect those dots. It's almost like a pointillist painting where you have thousands of dots, and then slowly as they come together, they start to connect, and then ultimately out of that, you have wisdom. You have an image that is created out of that. What I hope to do today is provide you each of those three: information, knowledge, and wisdom. So let's start off with a simple foundation. The foundation is to say this. Many definitions of a business model exist. The one that I like the most is simply this: a method by which a firm uses its resources, cash, technology, its people, to offer its customers better value than its competitors and make money doing so. It tells who pays how much and how often do they pay. For those of you that are looking to start companies or even begin to work for companies, especially early stage companies, the question that the board, the investors, the new employee coming in the door are going to ask is, what do you do, who do you sell to, and how do you make money? It's pretty simple. The how do you make money part is often the challenge for many startups. They have very cool technology. They think they know who's going to buy it, but they have no idea how they're going to get it in the hands of those individuals. Are they going to create a website? Are they going to join, sign on to the App Store? Are they going to go retail? Are they going to use a distribution channel or partner? That's the big crux of it. So that's the question you have to continue to think about, is how do we ultimately make money from what we are developing? So what's changed a lot in the way we operate in this world is the way that companies operate, the way that companies are formed and developed. And this chart is not really meant, in great detail to be read, but overall what you have here is an example of how over time you have points of history where as industries developed, changed, they went away, what you had is different ways of communicating with the world, different ways of actually connecting with consumers. If you think about back in the days of merchants and mechanics and industrial businesses, the way they operated and communicated was much different. Retail stores existed, but in a very, very, very different way. They were family-run stores. Most of the products and services we bought from were from a few large retailers like Sears, whether that be your washer and dryer or your tools or other things. As technology continued to mature, what you saw is the financial service industry becoming very, very sophisticated. And the financial service industry began to allow us to see business in a global way. Out of that came complex advertising campaigns, global marketing and distribution mechanisms, and what you saw is entirely new ways to buy and reach the end user, the products. What really changed is at this end of the world, where you had technology was then introduced in such a way that distribution of goods, ultimately the ability to connect an individual who wants a product or service to that product or service, the barriers of distance, the barriers of manufacturing suddenly went away. The United States has probably done this better than almost any place in the world. We can get something delivered tomorrow that we ordered this afternoon at 11 a.m. or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, whether it be a product or a service. Because of financial support and backing for those type of organizations, whether it be the manufacturers, the UPS, the FedEx, and others, the distribution channels have shrunk greatly. When I travel to different parts of the world, they find it amazing the selection of products and services that we have in the United States. And when you go elsewhere, you notice how limited it is. If you're living in parts of Europe, if you're living in parts of Africa, parts of Asia, if you're living in most of Russia, the ability to actually order something today and see it arrive in the next month is very, very unlikely. And the more remote you are, the less likely it is it's ever going to reach you on time or without being lost in some part of the distribution channel. So I encourage you to think about, as technology has changed and distribution channels have changed, it has impacted the way that we operate and build companies. So at MIT, when we think about how do you bring a company from the idea to the market, or what is so often called the lab to the market, the way you think about that has to integrate the business model. So for those of you here that are scientists or researchers or engineers, as you're thinking about your new products, your service, or your technology, you have to continually test who is going to buy this, how am I going to get it to the consumer? How will this ultimately impact the people that I care about, the people that are going to benefit from my product or my service? Just as Bob was sharing with us before, some of the learnings he had as he was developing his new company were those bumps in the road, as they realized that various ideas they had about, hey, we'll give it away for free, or perhaps we'll go through this particular distribution channel, those things did not work. You learn from those, you incorporate, you speak to more consumers, you speak to more investors that are expert in the space, and you modify your approach. So as all of you think about building companies, products, and technology, think about how are you getting it to the consumer. I think the mistake that a lot of people have is they think that as they read the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or MSNBC, as they hear about these stories of these companies and the stratospheric growth of these companies, that they think success is this linear process, when it's really not. Success is really messy. It's noisy. There's lots of bumps, lots of failures and challenges, whether it be because of market acceptance, technology failures, or it happens to just simply because the market was not ready for what you were doing. The goal is for you to figure out throughout those bumps and those curves how to identify opportunity and also how to modify your products and services. So that brings us to business models in general. There's lots of different ways to think about a business model. Complexity was famous for years. I remember when I was in graduate school, they would talk about business models, sales and marketing and distribution, and it was mind-boggling. If they passed it out on an 8.5 by 11 sheet, you would need a magnifying glass to figure out what was happening, because the distribution channels were not as sophisticated. The technology was not as sophisticated. So you had complex models. And within these complex models, there were lots of points of failure. Lots of points where your reseller or your OEM channel, your original equipment manufacturer or your distributor was failing. Lots of points where the manufacturing was not succeeding or the retail environment was struggling. So what's happened is you've seen simplification of business models, these ideas that become simplified in such a way where you say to yourself, I'm building this and I want it to be in the hands of these people, whether that be a consumer, a doctor, a lawyer, it happens to be a large corporation. What's the easiest way to get there? And leveraging technology, leveraging all of those things that are out there, including the good advice of experienced people, will help simplify this. An example might be Zipcar, a company we're all very familiar with. This is a relatively simple business model. It almost seems so simple that you'd be amazed if you presented this to an investor and said, this is our model, this is it. And we're going to build basically a company worth, a publicly traded company, I don't even know what their market cap is at right now. Fantastic, successful organization operating globally in many cities around the world. They kept it very simple, very organized business model. How many people here use Dropbox? You get 2/3 of the group here that use Dropbox. When's the last time you saw a Dropbox advertisement on TV? It doesn't exist. 20 years ago, if you were looking to build a company, you'd have to have an advertising budget. You have to think about how we're going to wind up getting this into the hands of the right people. Who are the right people? Are we going to sell to businesses? Are we going to sell to individuals? What's Dropbox's business model? How come you guys know so much about Dropbox? How is that? Word of mouth. Other people told you it's viral. So somebody tells you about this incredible thing called Dropbox, and you can sign up for free. You can get a certain amount of megabits of space for free. And all of a sudden, you start uploading photos, or you're sharing PowerPoint presentations and documents, and your friend signs on. And then all of a sudden, you tell 3 other friends, and they sign on. And then all of a sudden, when that is shown as viable, before you know it, they've got an entire model here that is making them a fortune because they now have businesses and large, what they call pro subscribers, large users, paying large dollars in order to access that data. It's fantastic. Does that look like a complicated business model? No, not really. Here's another example of simplicity rules. We have the luxury of leveraging technology, and we also have different types of mechanisms in order for us to educate consumers. Viral marketing is certainly one of those we'll talk about today. So simply put, your business model is not your business. Please remember that. The business model and business model innovation is critical in developing a quality business, attacking new markets, and driving profitability. Just as Bob had shared earlier, the ability to modify, change, and dwarf your business model is critical because just one small change can make all of the difference. And we're going to talk about some companies that made small changes and has made all of the difference in their success. So I'll do sort of the academic part of this presentation to give you sort of components of the business model, and then we're going to talk about some good examples